Hi friends, my name is Kayla Rain, and today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for the month of May, where I read a total of 9 books. So in the month of May, I read 9 books. 4 of them were from my May TBR, which is pretty cool because I'm not always super great about sticking to those. And then the rest were just books that I just felt like reading at the moment. But I'll go ahead and jump into my wrap up, starting with the books that I read off of my May TBR, starting with Inside Out and Back In by Tana Lay. And this is a middle grade written in verse, and it follows a main character and her family as they relocate from Vietnam to the United States. They're a refugee family and they have had to leave their father behind, who is currently a prisoner of war. And this book was really beautifully written. I think that it was written in a really simplistic manner, which was great because it was from the point of view of a very young girl who was experiencing all this. And I think that that was just like the perfect tone for such a heavy novel. And this was just really well done. I think that it was very impactful in the way that it delivered the story, and I really enjoyed it and definitely recommend it. So 5 out of 5 stars for this one. Next, I picked up the Burn for Burn trilogy by Siobhan Vivian and Jenny Han, and those books include Burn for Burn, Fire with Fire, and Ashes to Ashes. And this trilogy follows 3 girls who have teamed up to get revenge on 3 separate people who have wronged them. And it's such an interesting concept, and some really great things about this trilogy is the writing just really allows you to just become absorbed and completely just enmeshed in the world. It is a contemporary setting, so it's in our world, but it just feels kind of separated and its own little, like, it's on an island, so it is its own little island within our world, but it really feels disconnected from the rest of the universe. And it's just really dark and summery at the same time, and there was just something really cool about how atmospheric it felt. And the characters were really great too. I loved reading them. Unfortunately, there were some problematic aspects that I just wasn't a fan of, mainly the suicide or attempted suicide for revenge plotline. To me, that is super problematic and just really annoying to read, and I will give this book series the benefit that it was written some time ago. It's not something more recent when we've actually had those discussions, especially considering 13 Reasons Why. So that in itself I don't necessarily think was a malicious intent from the authors, but it is very problematic. And there's also a storyline of a main character who was fat in middle school and then is skinny in high school, and she has had a glow up to the point where no one actually would recognize what she looked like before because she's just skinny and beautiful now. And that to me was almost just like, you can't be fat and beautiful and popular and all this other stuff, and that was just kind of annoying concept to the book. I didn't really enjoy that, and those were the 2 main problematic things that I found with this book. However, this was an incredibly enjoyable read as far as just getting into it, following the revenge stories, and I thought that it was just so unique, and I have literally never read anything like it before. So if you are comfortable going into this book with those 2 particular problematic pieces in mind, then I think it's fine to read, but sometimes you don't really feel comfortable reading that stuff, so I'm giving you the heads up. I've decided not to mention my ratings on this because I don't want to discourage or encourage anyone to read this. I just want it to be a personal decision based on the review that I just gave. Next, I read Geek Guerrilla by Ashley Poston. This was actually sent to me for review, and I was so excited to read this because it is basically a love letter to geek culture, and I adored that. It follows 2 main characters. So it follows one main character who is our Cinderella figure, and she lives in Charleston, South Carolina with her stepmother and 2 stepsisters. Her father's passed away, and she is obsessed with this sci-fi show that her father was also obsessed with and also created a con for, and she's trying to create this cosplay to go to this convention and win the cosplay contest to get out of her home. And then the other character is currently starring in the reboot of said favorite sci-fi show, and he is the prince figure in this, and they end up accidentally getting in contact with each other without actually knowing each other's identities. And the book just kind of ensues from there, and it all kind of revolves around this convention towards the end of the book, and it was just so fantastic. So one of my favorite things in this book was the sheer amount of references to nerd and geek culture just throughout. Like, it's just really hammering it in, and that's something that I love personally. I know it's something that a lot of people aren't a big fan of, especially when it comes to like Ready Player One. I know a lot of people weren't excited about all the 80s pop culture references. This book has quite a few of them, but that's something that I personally adore. And the characters, the way that they just kind of like slowly got to know each other and just like fall in love over the course of the novel without knowing each other, that was so cute and wonderful, and I loved it so much. So I did end up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was just so delightful. I also read Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. I actually picked this particular novel up while I had the ARC, and then I got the finished copy because I love Ashley Herring Blake, and this book was really incredible. This book follows a main character whose brother was accused of rape, and she is a self-proclaimed feminist. Her family are self-proclaimed feminist, and she is just trying to grapple with the situation of having someone that you love and trust and care for being accused of something so horrible. And I thought that this book did such a great job of exploring that. It's a difficult topic. It was not easy to read, and I'm sure it wasn't easy to write, but Ashley Herring Blake, I think, did a really great job. I do want to put a trigger warning for rape and sexual assault. There are explicit scenes within this book, but I thought that they were done well and done in a way that was important to the storyline without it trying to be like a shock value or like adding anything shocking to the story. So I do want to put a trigger warning out there for that. If that is something that is harmful for you to read, I cannot recommend this book because it is such a difficult thing to read, even not being triggered by that. I also picked up The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Anne Brashares. This is a reread. How many rereads it has been, I don't know. I couldn't tell you because there have been so many, but I try to reread this at least every other year. This is 2 years in a row for me, maybe even 3 years in a row actually, and I'm not sad about it. This is one of my favorite novels of all time, and I adore it so much. It follows 4 main characters who are best friends, and they're all spending their summer in separate areas of the world, which is something that they've never done before, and they're just kind of exploring themselves, exploring their friendship, their families, and just so much is going on, but it's so beautifully written and put together, and I adore it so much. So obviously, like, 5 out of 5 stars. I also picked up Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This is a YA contemporary that follows a main character named Asa, who is friends with a boy whose millionaire father has went missing, and there is an award to find him because he's in trouble with the law. And it just kind of follows that storyline. I will be honest, there's not a lot of mystery here. It's honestly kind of like a typical contemporary novel where girl meets boy and they kind of like explore that relationship. There's some family dynamics, there's friendship stuff going on, but something that's unique to this novel is the main character does have OCD, and I thought that that was something that was really great about this book because it showed a main character who does have a diagnosed mental illness throughout her everyday life, how that affects her, and how sometimes it doesn't affect her, which I think is really important and nice to see. And this particular piece is own voices, so that is also something that is really awesome because it's written with some integrity, care, and personal experience. Overall, I gave this like a 3.5, 4 out of 5 stars. It was good. It's pretty typical John Green. If you enjoy John Green's writing, I think you would genuinely enjoy this. There are a lot of metaphors. There's a lot of just really almost like teenagers trying to talk like adults type situations throughout this book. So again, very John Green-esque, but enjoyable if that is what you're into, which I personally am, so it worked well for me. And the final book that I read, I actually don't have a physical copy of because I listened to it on audiobook, and that was Bras and Broomsticks by Sarah Milnowski. This was one of my favorite books in middle school, and I was a little bit bummed to see that it didn't stand the test of time. It was a little problematic, and that sucked. There was a transphobic comment, And then there was also, I think, there's one character of color with a speaking part, and she is a service worker. She's a maid for a rich white family. So that was problematic and really sucked, and it was disappointing, and sometimes I get really nervous about revisiting childhood favorites because then you find out that maybe they weren't up to par from, you know, the standards that you have now for books. So it was disappointing. Other than that, it was still enjoyable. I still loved revisiting those characters, and it did kind of bring me back to a time when that book was just like my everything, and I really loved it. But I decided not to give it a rating because, again, it just kind of had some problematic elements while still being enjoyable. So it's just one of those books that is going to be not necessarily a problematic fave, but something that I find problematic but still have some enjoyment out of. So there's that. That has been it for today's video. I don't know if I'm going to have many videos up this week because the weather is really hot and I don't have a lot of time to film in the mornings, and I'm sure, as you can see, I'm a little glowy right now because it's so stifling hot in my apartment and I have no air conditioning, so I'm just kind of living through it, living my best, sweatiest summer life. But I will leave links in the down bar below for my other social media sites such as Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter, and y'all should totally check me out on there. As always, thank you so much for watching. Stay weird.